point in time. We are recording, so I just wanted to let you know that. Okay, so I'll introduce Deb later, but I'm Judy Heline, okay? And so I'm the one that's been communicating with you and sending you all the goodies and whatever, and writing up some of the stuff that's been in our voter. So if you want to just introduce yourself and what conference, what unit that you're with, that would be great. Susan Dill?
I'm Judy Smith, and I'm chair.
You're muted, Susan.
I'm Judy Smith. I'm chair of the Green Spring unit.
Okay. And Susan?
Sorry. Susan Dill, Chantilly Centerville Day. I'm the unit chair.
I'm Sue Worden. I'm with.
Okay. And Ann, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ann Cantor. I'm with the McLean unit.
Okay. And Judy, you already introduced yourself. Sydney?
I'm Sydney Johnson, the Reston Day unit.
Okay. Celeste?
Hi, everybody. I'm Celeste Land, and I'm with the Oakton Vienna unit.
Yes. And Julie?
I'm Julie Jones. I'm here with helping Judy because we work together on so many projects, and I'm with the Reston Evening unit.
Yeah. Thank you. Pat? You're muted, Pat.
Pat Fahey, Springfield unit.
And president, co-president of our league. Everybody knows you. Yes. Susan? I think you already introduced yourself. Susan Worden. Susan Worden.
Okay, I'm with the Mount Vernon J unit.
Okay, great. Thanks, Susan. And Lois?
Lois Page with the Fairfax Station unit.
Karen?
Karen Beck, and I'm also with the Springfield unit.
Great. And Zoom 2 is Emma Bed, so we'll pass on that. DP, I think that's Deborah Poole. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Okay. And Jane?
I'm
Go ahead,
Reston
Jane.
Evening. I'm Reston Evening.
Yes, thank you. So you're with Julie, Julie. Yep. And Jane Byers, I think you're, okay. Hi, Deb.
There.
Jane is muted and she's off camera, so she might be getting her cup of coffee. And Susan Avalonat, did I say that name? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. I'm with the Green Spring unit.
Yeah, so you and Judy from
Yes.
Green Spring. Okay. Did I miss anybody? Except for Deb Wake. Okay. And I am really happy that Deb has taken the time out and agreed to come this morning to present the study. And she's going to be presenting her slides. And the interesting thing to me was Deb and I met a couple of weeks ago for coffee to just talk about it. And the interesting thing to me was that I had not seen her slide presentation when I did the abbreviation and edited the full study, which is about 63 pages or so. And I just concentrated. I figured our average member is not going to read 63 pages. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think. I read the full study, and I'm not going to ask anybody else here to confess how many people read the full study. But anyway, what I discovered, oh, Karen did. Okay, great. And I know Sydney did, because she called and requested it right away. So did Ann Cantor. Okay, great. But so what I did was when I wrote the abbreviated study, I just zeroed in really on the consensus questions, because I thought if anybody is really studying for an exam, man, they go for what they think might be the questions, right? And so they would be able to discuss the questions at the unit meetings. And then when I previewed the slide presentation that Deb will show us, it was like pretty much that's what they did too. So we're thinking on the same track. So so Deb, many of you know Deb because Deb was a past president of the State League, but I know Deb best because Deb's also a member of the Fairfax League, and Deb ran our whole Metro Fund It, Fix It effort to get funding for Metro pretty many years ago, right, Deb? Yeah. And I actually was trying to groom Deb to be president of the League of Fairfax, but the state got to her first. So anyway, so Deb and Therese Martin did a lot of work on the transportation and taught me a lot about advocacy and meeting with legislators and things like that. So Deb, you would have thought when she stopped, when she had finished her second term as state president, might take some time off, but no, she signed up to chair this consensus study. So Deb, I'm just going to turn it over to you now. Okay.
Thank you, Judy. And I've gotten to work with so many of you and have mentored me when I joined the league. So great to see you all again. I'm going to start out by sharing my slides. And that means I can only see you if you pop to the top, if you raise your hand. So if you do have a question, raise your hand. And what we'll do first is just run through, these are the highlights of the study. And then we'll get to the consensus questions. And we won't go through the consensus process, but we may talk a little bit about it, but we're not going to do a consensus as a group.
Right.
Okay, so let me go ahead and share. Okay, do you guys see my slides?
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
Hooray. And if we needed a headline to encapsulate the entire study, it would be that voting is a right. Are there ways that we would want to restrict it? Or are there certain people that we would want to restrict? And so that's just kind of to sum it all up. So the study committee, besides myself in Fairfax, Irina von Breda was a member. In Southampton Roads, Carolyn Kaywood. In the Arlington League, Krista Rosa, Lisa Coteen-Gerchik, Liz Scheffler. In Williamsburg League, Karen Syracusa, Linda Rice, Pat Black Evers. And in the Roanoke League, Shirley Everett. And I know that you guys know this, but just to stress that it is a 2-year process and it actually starts before that because you have to put something together to take before the board so that it gets before convention to be approved by the delegates. And then the official time clock starts. And so the work that we do will be presented to the delegates at the 2025 convention, and hopefully the consensuses will result in a new position that gives us a better platform for advocacy. And one of the impetuses for this study, there are actually two constitutional amendments. One is the right to vote, which I'm trying to think what the House number is on that, but the House P&E got together last month and met to discuss 3 constitutional amendments, and this is one. And it has to do with voting rights for felons and also for those who have been mentally adjudicated. The other one is Delegate Rasool introduced in 2023 a bill that would enable 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. And because we didn't have a position for that, then we wanted to make sure that we included that in the study. So the 3 groups that are disenfranchised specifically in the Virginia Constitution are those who have committed a felony, those who have been mentally adjudicated by the courts, and those who are age 16 and 17-year-olds, or age 16 and 17. And we called this the unalienable right to vote because the league already has a stance that voting is a right. It's one of our principles that guides the league. And we felt that unalienable was the best description of that, and defined by Oxford Languages means it's unable to be taken away from or given away by the possessor. So here we see Eleanor Roosevelt, and I don't know how many of you are aware that she was a prominent league member. And the League was instrumental in creating the United Nations, and she was a member of that as well, and was the chair of the United Nations Human Rights Committee. And because of the League's participation and from the very beginning of the United Nations to this day, we continue to provide observers to the United Nations. And I know Anu has served as a observer, and other members locally have served, Jill Follows for years and years. So lots of our members have served as observers to the UN. So just to lift two statements here from the United Nations Human Rights Council. In December of 1948, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And recently, in December of 2017, in conjunction with the Carter Center, democracy arises from people's desire for dignity, equality, justice, liberty, and participation, their desire for a voice. And of course, what we're talking about here is voting. And if we look at discrimination, and we think that this is important because with our focus on diversion, equity, and inclusion, it's important to talk about the groups that have been excluded from the right to vote. And the definition of discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, especially on the grounds of ethnicity, age, sex, or disability. And some of the language that has been used to disenfranchise various groups, and you might notice that you could use these interchangeably between groups depending on who you wish to discriminate against. But statements like, they lack the capacity to understand voting, they will be unduly influenced by others on how to vote, the purity of the vote should not be sullied by them. And so just to be conscious of this othering language and how its intent is to discriminate and not to address whether or not they should have the capacity to vote. So just to talk a little bit about our purpose and aspirational goals, I think I've already talked about this some, but too often treated as a privilege. The League explicitly states that voting is a right. And we felt that the best way to start with this study was to examine the history and the underpinnings of the concept of the right to vote, and how it is an inherent right belonging to those living in a democracy. And then, as I mentioned, we focused on the ones that are specifically disenfranchised in the Virginia Constitution. It was kind of hard to find when the League formed some of its statements, like voting is a right. It was in our stated platform at least as early as 1942, but probably before that, since we as women were one of the groups that were disenfranchised originally. So of course, the first thing that we do is we look at what positions already exist, and we cannot act against any positions that are held at the national level. So we start there and look at what the national positions say about voting. Under the League principles, which is a little different from the positions, but under League principles, it says that every citizen should be protected in the right to vote. And further states under the positions that massive systemic reforms are needed to protect and improve our democracy, including preventing barriers to the ballot box and ending felony disenfranchisement. And so we know that this position is something that would be supported by the National League. And then part of forming a new position is also retaining existing positions. And As you may know, some of our positions seem a little outdated. For instance, those about how property is divided following a divorce. But you never know when you're going to need these positions again, even though it seems like that's outdated, it could come up again. And so we always retain the positions that we have because you just never know when you might need it. And so just looking at our positions that we currently have relating to voting, we state that voting is a right and responsibility. In the study, we didn't focus so much on some of the mechanics like needing to have land ownership or literacy as a requirement. Recently, the study looked at things like list maintenance and internet voting and things like that. So some of the mechanics have recently been studied. I believe that was in 2021 that we updated those positions. So we weren't looking to do that again, but more focused on who should be voting or not voting. And I also think it's important to lift out regarding those who have been convicted of a felony that we have a standing position that those with a felony conviction should be treated equally regardless of the nature of the crime. So we're not trying to parse out whether it was a violent crime or anything like that, but just that felons are restricted from voting in the Virginia Constitution. How do we want to look at that? And then we started looking at voting in the law. And so under Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the states are given authority regarding the time, places, and manner under which voting can occur. And then subsequent amendments expand it. Who is given the ability to vote. And while the 19th Amendment expanded the franchise for women, massive numbers of American women remained effectively disenfranchised because they were not white. The civil rights movement and the struggles for indigenous rights, Latino rights, and Asian American rights were required to make the 19th Amendment fundamentally true for all American women. States like Virginia, with a history of discrimination against Black voters, were placed under something called preclearance, where the states needed to pre-clear election laws with the Department of Justice before they could go into effect. And this was whether the laws intentionally or unintentionally affected Black or minority voters. Then the Shelby County, and let me go ahead and flip to the next slide because these are continued. The Shelby County decision in 2023 gutted a lot of these pre-clearance protections and allowed suppression tactics to go into effect right away in the United States. And these were not only pre-clearance states, but states that had not been under pre-clearance. That states were immediately able to disenfranchise some of their population. And then in the Bronovich versus DNC decision in 2021, that restricted further who could file a voter discrimination lawsuit. And so while the Constitution allows states to set the time and place of elections, it has been amended to protect voters in various ways. And I'm so happy to see Julie. One of the things that Julie did was she set up a meeting with Bernice Colvard when I was first becoming president, or I guess I'd been nominated to be state president, and really was pretty new to the league. And just to give me some background, because Bernice was a great historian for us, and to have an opportunity to meet with Bernice. And recently we have updated the history of the league that Bernice wrote, and she took it to 2009 and we brought it forward to, I think, 2020. You can find it on the Virginia State website if you'd like to purchase it. But I just wanted to take a plug from her book, or from the update of her book, to talk about what the Virginia League's role was regarding the voting. And so in 1964, when the poll tax was removed, and this is a quote, "The Virginia League was, or the LWVFA was jubilant at the demise of the poll tax at long last. The League and others mounted massive voter registration drives, which frequently resulted in registrars being swamped. During this time, registrars could only register voters at their offices. They could not leave to do so. However, neighborhood registrars could be appointed to register voters from their homes, and the League actively participated as neighborhood registrars or assisted in identifying these auxiliary registrars. This led to a huge increase in voter registration. And this isn't something I was aware of, that the League participated in as auxiliary or neighborhood registrars. And so I just thought that was important to note. And so thanking Bernice for her work in preserving our history. So specifically, when we look at the Virginia Constitution, it was drafted in 1902 with the intent of disenfranchising Black voters in particular. Many Jim Crow laws were put into the 1902 Constitution. There were things such as, excuse me, and actually I think this is coming up in a later slide, but additional laws were added to try to capture Black voters, to convict them of a felony and disenfranchise them from voting. So we'll get into that in the felony section. When the Constitution was updated in 1972, for whatever reason, they retained felony disenfranchisement. And questions that we've asked of some of the framers have been a bit vague, and not sure if it was because they had done so much to try to remove Jim Crow law language that they felt that they couldn't go there, or if it's because it was an oversight. But so the felony disenfranchisement remains. Those who have been mentally adjudicated as mentally incompetent have been removed from the right to vote, and those under the age of 18. One additional Virginia law was enacted in 2021, and this was the result of our efforts to try to replace the Voting Rights Act at the federal level. We've tried a number of times. I'm also a volunteer lobbyist for the National League, and I know Sue Warden worked with her doing that. We were not able to get an updated version of the Voting Rights Act. The latest version is called the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which you may have heard of. And because of the stumbling block trying to get it at the national level, we tried to get something put in place at the state level to provide some protections here. And that was passed in 2021. Judy mentioned the breadth of the length of the study. I just want to point out that it really is mostly 36 pages. And then we moved into the appendices, the groups that had gotten their right to vote in the years intervening since the first Constitution was passed. So these were the amendments. In the top part, we're really focusing on those three groups that are disenfranchised in the Virginia Constitution. And then at the last 20 pages are resources. And so if you have not had an opportunity to read the study, please reach out to Judy for a copy. We're hoping that this can be a useful resource to you and to give you other resources to refer to if you need them for regarding voting. So to talk a little about 16 and 17-year-olds, cultivating a voting habit is a way that students can learn about elections in a supportive community, like at home or in the schools, and gives them an opportunity at that age to ask questions and become informed, and also to start developing a lifelong habit, because we, of course, support voting, and we think that it's something in Virginia you have an opportunity to participate in every year, and we would hope that voters would take advantage of that opportunity. Regarding skills and knowledge, learning about and participating in elections makes for more engaged and informed citizenry. And since the education is fresh, they may be better informed than many of older adults. They have the capacity to understand complexities, and while they're seeking independence and opportunity to participate as adults rather than children, many would welcome the opportunity to vote at a younger age. Participation in elections helps better understand the process, promotes critical thinking, develops a better understanding of the importance of democracy. And in recent years, we've seen a drop in that about whether people consider it important to live in a democracy. And it also provides an opportunity to learn the consequences of elections. Considering candidate platforms enables young voters to help form their own values and priorities. And finally, younger citizens are not adequately represented. Policies with long-term consequences are made without the input of those most affected. For instance, climate change, gun violence, healthcare, housing, education, and debt accrual. And we think that 16 is a far better age than 18, because at that point, many leave home and they strike off for college or to be independent, and they have so much else to focus on that when they're 16 and they're in a supportive community of school and family, maybe that's a better time to start getting them to be active voters. In addition, 16 is the age when many people receive their first paycheck, they start paying taxes, and it's a founding principle of our country that those who are taxed should have representation. So felony disenfranchisement, Senator Yvonne Miller, and I'm trying to remember when she died, it might have been in '86. So her life's work was to try to get felony disenfranchisement removed in Virginia. And since her death, Senator Mamie Locke took up her fight, and the league has been engaged in it at least the last 5 years, and probably before that, trying to remove felony disenfranchisement. So Virginia broadened its list of disenfranchising crimes. This is back in 1902 to include things like loitering, being homeless, and even being unemployed. In 1971, as I mentioned, the disenfranchisement was not removed when many of the Jim Crow laws were. Virginia disenfranchises all of people who with felony convictions, even after they have completed their sentences and parole. And this has two things. Some people during prior administrations, when the administration was the proactive body to start the restoring of rights, people got their rights back and they didn't know it. And now people are being denied having their rights restored, but they don't know why. And if you go back and look at the recording for the General Assembly when they were discussing the constitutional amendment, one woman said that in the past year, she worked with 15 people that they still don't even have an answer. So they didn't even get a response to their application. And so the current administration leaves it up to the individual to apply, but the criteria is not shared, and why somebody doesn't hear an answer or is refused is not shared. And so the constitutional amendment that is in the General Assembly right now would make restoration automatic, which we already have a position for. But we wanted to look at felony disenfranchisement even more closely. But just so that you know, we do have support in our positions already for the current constitutional amendment, which would make voting rights paused while you're serving a felony conviction, and then automatically restored once you're released. And this is something that the league has worked on for a number of years with a number of other organizations. So in just a few more notes about felony disenfranchisement in Virginia, since 1970, Virginia's jail population has increased 800%. And since 1983, the state's prison population has more than doubled. And perhaps you've heard in the news recently that the federal prison down in Red Onion in Wise County, there are inmates setting themselves on fire there because they are not being heard or receiving treatment. There's a push to try to get the Office of the Ombudsman involved in that. That was just, that office was just put in place last year, I think. So anyway, just to let you know that there are issues there. In 2019, Black people constituted 20% of state residents, but more than 53% of the people in prison. And in 2023, 12% of voting age Black Virginians were impacted, and that's more than 1 in 10 not allowed to vote. The statistic given in the hearing last month was 1 in 7. Communities where Black people have been kept from the ballot box before the Voting Rights Act are the same communities where Black people are incarcerated at higher rates after the Voting Rights Act. And then we have a graph here that kind of shows pictorially the impact on Black voters in Virginia as compared to other races. So moving to mental competence. Approximately 12,000 adult Virginians are disenfranchised, despite many of them having the capacity to understand the act of voting and a desire to vote, but simply because a court has appointed a guardian for them, the default action is to remove voting rights. A person under guardianship should retain the right to vote unless the individual cannot communicate with or without reasonable accommodations and express a desire to participate in the process of voting. Courts considering guardianship should apply a presumption that the right to vote is retained, a standard that does not exceed what is required of other voters, and individually tailored accommodations consistent with the Equal Protection and Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. The mental capacity standard should be the capacity to understand the act of voting and a desire to vote. And in August, there was a meeting of the Disability Commission, and one father shared his experience with what happened to his son. So he hired a lawyer to help set up a guardianship for his son. And it wasn't until the final papers that he saw that his son's voting rights had been removed. And he was there, whoa, whoa, whoa. And talked to his lawyer about what was going on here. It was never mentioned by the attorney, by the guardian ad litem, the judge, or any of the literature. And the lawyer said, well, how will you convince a judge that your son should retain his right to vote if he needs to be in a guardianship, if he can't take care of himself enough that he needs to be placed in a guardianship? And the man said that his son was on the student council at school. He was in family discussions, and he went with his father when he went to vote. And so after an additional $1,800 in attorney fees, court filings, and meetings with the judge, his son's voting rights were restored. And he votes in every election, and he is often the one reminding his father there's an election coming up to make sure that his father goes and votes. And so we think that it's important that voting rights be included. Well, this man stressed that voting rights should be included in every guardianship discussion, and we would further argue that it shouldn't be the default action of the courts to take away voting rights when a person is placed under guardianship. So just to say a little bit more about program, that the League of Women Voters of Virginia is committed to protecting every citizen's intrinsic right to vote, that League positions are for the long term. And if we believe in a principle, it doesn't matter whether today's political winds are unfavorable, we will go for the moonshot. And then just a little bit about the consensus process. I know you know this, but it might be helpful to remind members before they get into this that the questions are yes or no. I mean, well, you know, they don't need to be reminded of that. You guys know the questions are yes or no, but that we're not trying to lead to a particular answer. We're really trying to invoke a thoughtful discourse with these questions. And we're trying to get past personal biases that people may have against some of these disenfranchised groups that are in our Constitution. They help us discover where we have agreement and where we do not. And so it's the discussion that is more important than the questions. The questions are just an aid, but we do need to know where your unit falls, whether you have consensus or not. And any additional comments would be helpful too that are shared as part of the discussion. And just a reminder, it's not voting. And Carolyn Kaywood was the program chair when I was president, and I found something that she'd written that I thought was very helpful, that the consensus process keeps us truly grassroots, but does not risk the disgruntlement that plurality voting can create. And so really we're trying to get a general sense of where do our members fall on the act of voting. And
thanks, Deb. Can I just add one thing to that?
Yep.
That locally,
Yep.
I think all the other leagues in Virginia have already gone through this process and sent you their feedback, right?
We have one more.
Okay,
yes.
one more besides us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so we're kind of late into this because of everything that was going on with elections and things like that. So I personally, before we get into your questions and everything, because I'm afraid that somebody might need to get off early, is like the sooner that you can get me your unit report, which is basically the answers to the questions, the consensus questions, I would really appreciate it, because I need to get the finished product to Deb by the end of December. Okay. And that means that I also have to get it to the board before that so that they can give approval, which will probably be an online approval. But I just want to put that kind of before you. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Bullets is great, you know, but the yes or no's is what we really need too. And then if you didn't reach consensus, kind of bullet reasons why you didn't, I think is helpful to the committee. The other thing before we get into your questions is I want to just thank Deb for bringing up her meeting with when she and Julie met with Bernice, because that kind of history, we need to kind of like remember those things and remember the contributions that our people have made that have gone before us. And I just got my December voter yesterday, and I saw the beautiful tributes to two of our members in there, Pat Brady, who did a whole lot with the U.S. League for the jury system, and then also Shirley Olson and the contribution. So thank you, Deb, for reminding us about that. And I think it's important that we remember what's gone before us. A lot of hard work has gone before us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we continue the legacy. Okay.
Judy, can we get these slides in the
That's
chat?
my main question.
Yeah, can we get access to these slides?
Yeah, I have them. I can send you all. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
please do. Please do.
Yes, please.
And also, will we be able to share this recorded presentation with our members? Because this was a very thoughtful, comprehensive, well-done presentation. And I think that our members would really benefit from watching it before they get into the discussion, because this is what's in the voter is very bare bones. And if you want people to be discussing thoughtfully and addressing their biases, then they need to know up front what the issues are. And this presentation does it so well. I'd love.
I'll send it to all of you who are present on this
Great.
thing, which and you can use it however you want. I will mention that, you know, the full report we were not able to put on the website because I think of concerns that it is not a finished position statement. Okay. And I think there were concerns that our website, anybody can get to it and could possibly change things and not get, so this should really only be given to the members, to your league members.
Can we get the summary? I believe you said there was a summary. Can we get that?
The what?
You said there was a summary of the paper that we could disseminate?
No.
No, okay, so this is the
The full
summary.
report, the full report, the 36 pages plus appendices, and that is not on our website. The
But you
abbreviated
said there was a
version-
summary of the 36 pages.
Oh, it's in the horn, isn't
It's
it?
in the, that's what's in the voter.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the,
okay.
that's
Okay.
that's the
It's
November voter.
November voter.
The November voter. Ah, okay.
Yes, we put it in the November voter because the December, we weren't sure that you all would get it before this briefing.
Okay.
I appreciated getting it then. That's great.
That's good to know because I was looking at the December one and going, this is not enough information to be able to have a thoughtful
No,
discussion.
the
but-
abbreviated version is found in the November voter. And that
Perfect,
is
thank
on the
you.
website if you don't have a copy of it.
Thank you so much.
But we have
Lois?
to send to you to get the full study, right?
Yes, but first I'm going to send you all this copy of the slide presentation, which Deb had given to me before.
Right.
Sydney, you had your hand up.
Just a couple of things. There is a sort of, you might say, an abbreviated version of some history of what we've done in the league that Therese Martin had compiled, and Julie, here you are, Julie. Julie got all the materials from Therese and sort of sorted through them and put them in order, and we put them in a file. It's in the last I saw, it was in the bottom file drawer of the left-hand cabinet in the office. You can find a lot about things that that the league has done since Fairfax League was formed in there. Then it's kind of summary versions of more complete information you probably had from Bernice Covard. And the second thing is we actually have a card on the current ability of people who have had a decision about mental incapacity that assures them that there are ways that they can, within the constrictions that we still have, that they can get help to vote, including checking on what their guardianship says. And then, that might have to be challenged, but it says check with your guardianship decree to see if it says expressly that you cannot vote. If not, you can vote. And these cards are with all those multi-language cards that we have in the storage room in the office, in case you want to have a look at them.
They're in the storage room. Okay.
Now that's an institutional memory. She knows what drawer things are in.
Because I had to use that drawer, and I was one of the people that compiled these cards.
So are they there? That card isn't on the website though, correct?
Not that I know of, because it's
I read,
is it?
I read the entire study on the website.
No, it is not on the website. The abbreviated version of the study can be found on the website in the November voter. Okay.
I've seen that. I saw something online and I read 63 pages online last month.
Yeah, because Judy, you sent us all of us were going to be the discussion leaders. Who sent us the attachment? It was an attachment to some email I got.
Yes, that's
Not the full version of the study unless you requested it specifically.
Yeah.
And you might have gotten it from somebody else who requested it from me and sent it to you.
whatever.
Okay, but I got it on an attachment from you.
The
I
full
got it as
study?
an extension.
Yeah, I did too. Although I had it before, and I went to the link before, but I also got it on an attachment. I've forgotten the date though, but we could look at.
I don't think I got it, and I would like
No.
it, to be Judy.
If you requested it, I sent it.
Or maybe I requested it.
Yeah, I don't know, either that or somebody requested it, but I hit a link in an email and got all 63 pages.
That would be the link that Judy sent us, I believe.
It could have been one from the committee. If you're part of the universal voting group, materials have been shared out through that.
Yeah.
No.
Can I ask a question of you, Deb? I'm not quite versed on why we are doing the study part on felons' voting rights. I understand 16-year-olds, we don't have a position, but since we already have a position on the felons, what do we hope to get from this study that we don't already have? I already got one member call me and wanting to know about that, so they're on top of it.
Because they're explicitly disenfranchised in the Virginia Constitution, the core group that we were working with, so we were under the impression that because our principles state that voting is a right, that we could that we could support not removing people's right to vote when they received a felony conviction. And National said, no, you don't really have a position for that.
Okay.
And so that could be a group that your members decide should lose the right to vote when they commit a crime, but there's really no connection between committing a crime and voting unless it's an election crime. And so why are crimes and voting tied together? Particularly if you look at the disproportionate number of Black voters that are embroiled in that policy.
I mean, I think we have to consider that Virginia is a state where very strongly among a whole lot of people, voting is considered a privilege. There is a real mindset on that for a lot of people. And historically, frankly, that's the way it always was. We started out, you had to be a white male that owned property, and that was your privilege to vote. And other people were not privileged. And then gradually over time, the expansion of the privilege to vote has been expanded. And in a lot of cases, that is how it was seen and still is seen. The idea that it's an inalienable right is not actually historically how it started out or has ever been. So we're kind of fighting a mental mindset here and changing it. So although while we all, it's an inalienable right, well, things, well, no, a lot of people, historically, we didn't believe that. And a lot of people still don't.
That's interesting.
But if you look at our principles dating back to at least 1942, the league has stated voting is a right, not a privilege. So it could be that our league community is not of the same mind as the general population, because we also had the crazy idea women should have the right to vote.
Right. But that may have been a new idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sydney? I have heard people say, well, I don't think murderers should ever get their right to vote back. I think this is something that's kind of, to follow on from what Anne said, kind of embedded in a lot of people, that people who are convicted of a crime, especially a serious crime and I know you've said, Deb, that we're not distinguishing between the kind of crime it is, but a lot of people do. And they would say, well, if somebody committed a murder, some kind of heinous thing, they should never get their rights back. And if we put it in our position, which I don't have I'm not opposed to doing, we have to be aware that there's a lot of people out there who would have to change their minds in order to accept that amendment.
Painfully change their mind, yeah.
Well, it doesn't.
I think with all of these, you're going to be going up against emotions.
Yeah.
It's not it's a gut thing. I know somebody who was fill in the blank and they shouldn't have voted, and therefore nobody should vote. And we've got to work past the gut issues here. We can be as rational and logical as we want, but what we're going to hear at the consensus meetings is a lot of gut stuff, even from our own supporters. I have heard from league I talked with a teen league member who was very active in the league community, who was very passionately opposed to 16 and 17-year-olds voting.
Right,
So
right.
this is not necessarily a monolithic position.
And I think you, Celeste, you and Sydney raised an important thing, is that I think this is like emotional, and I think it's going to be a good chance to practice civil discourse, because, and also to be like, not to take particular stands one way or the other as a discussion leader, because we really need to hear from the members how they think before a position is created. And maybe we need to do a lot more education, on these issues. Like, and it'll be interesting to see how many of our members are open to changing minds. Okay. Because, for example, I've raised 5 teenagers at one time. Okay. My kids were all like very close together. And so I went into reading this study thinking, no way would I give a 16-year-old the right to vote, knowing 16-year-olds. But then I read, like in Virginia, my goodness, a 16-year-old, that's the age a child can be emancipated. Well, I didn't know that until I read this study, so that made me think, and then today I just heard, and they're working now and they're paying taxes. Okay, so those are some things I hadn't considered. I was just looking at it from the point of view of a mother of a teenager.
And as a mother of 2 former teenagers, one of them went to college out of state. And so her first years of voting were spent as an absentee out-of-state voter.
Yeah.
And getting her to vote was a real pain. And this is when we had some rather close elections and her vote really did matter, but it was such a big production. And, we muddled through it, and she is a very dedicated voter today, but it would have been a lot easier if she'd gotten into the habit at 16 and then it was just a natural.
And developed that habit before she went off to college. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Lois?
Well, I just wanted to add, it gets more complicated when you get to college, as you said, with the absentee and so on. I did want to clarify on the which one did you say we don't have a position on? Are there a couple that we don't? The one on felony, we have a position on that, right?
The current position is automatic restoration. But if we're talking about a right to vote, are there groups that we think should be restricted from that? And the groups that are specifically mentioned in our Virginia Constitution are felons, 16-year-olds, and those have been mentally adjudicated by the courts.
So despite the fact that we have a position, we're asking our people to just open their minds about this whole subject. We're not zeroing in on a change in the position, correct?
Right. And just to further, way back when I talked to Jessica Chaparral Jones and Jones Cabral in the National League, because we work with her with Lobby Corps, and said, what happens after we do all this study, we have all the consensus, and we don't come up with anything new for a position, then what? And she said, usually you can find something.
I was
little thing to change.
Yeah, I was looking at that and I was thinking, that might be something for the league to encourage, which is helping felons fill out that 13-page form.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Is having workshops or something, for felons to make that application, because it's too much, they just can't do it. And it might take several sessions because they have to find stuff and come back and or even run a course on how to do your application. I just want to add one more little piece of information that I have that most people don't, which is
Oops.
Yeah. Well,
tax. I don't know if everybody understands it. The poll tax. The poll tax in Virginia was I don't agree quite what you have in there, but anyways, poll was, you had to pay not much, $1.50, okay, to vote. But if you were a black man coming in or a black person coming in and you'd missed 30 elections, 30 years, you're now 50 years old or whatever it was, 51 years old, and you missed 30 elections, you had to pay the poll tax for all those elections.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay.
Pat, you're
Oh.
muted. Pat, you're muted.
Okay, so you couldn't, it said 3 years, but I think that was current. At some point, were charging you $45 to vote, to register to vote. So that's where the poll tax was so restrictive.
Oh, that's good to
Okay,
know.
Pat,
And I wanted to add that, the poll tax, you had to pay interest as well. And in Deb's article, it references Harper versus Department of Elections. And if you read your voter carefully, there was an article about Annie Harper, who was a Fairfax County resident, and she is the one who is referenced in Harper verse in the Supreme Court decision. And she was a Black woman that lived in down in the southern part of Fairfax County. So I have to look up what article, which, and there's a one of those, historical markers down by Gump Springs. It's an interesting story of how this happened. So I'm going to I'll send it to Judy and she can send it to everybody, but it is a very interesting article about how she persisted when she was a very poor woman. We don't know who bankrolled her lawyers. That information I could not find, but that's because the federal eliminated it for federal elections, but did not eliminate it for state and local elections. So there were 5 states, I'll bet you could figure out which 5 they were, that continued to use the poll tax for state and local elections long after the federal law had been passed. So it's an interesting another piece of history. I do have a question though for Deb. So in Virginia, when somebody goes under guardianship, is that automatically their voting rights are taken away?
Right now it is. It's a default position.
Okay,
Whether
so
or
that,
not, and it could be that a family is trying to protect a member from financial,
Right.
being scammed or whatever, but they still have the capacity to vote.
yeah, and it is dear to my heart because I have a friend whose grandchild, they live, the parents and the grandchild live in Colorado. And this young man is autistic. He has never spoken a word in his whole life. He does not speak, which apparently that is true for some autistic people. He just recently graduated from high school with a regular high school diploma. And he is under guardianship because he does not speak, because his parents are very concerned if he was involved in something and was, a police officer approached him or whatever, he would not speak. He cannot speak. He does not speak. But he recently voted because in Colorado, you can be under guardianship and also have the right to vote.
Nice.
Yeah, well, you can here if it's explicit. It's just that they aren't accustomed to specifying that when they work out the guardianship.
Yeah, but isn't it a legal cost for the parent to go through all of that?
To reinstate it if it's been stripped away.
Yeah.
But if the guardian ad litem and the judge are aware, they can put it into the decision initially.
yeah.
They're aware that this person could have if they ask the question, does this person have the capacity to understand the purpose of voting and does he have a desire to vote? They could say this person would That's why.
retains the right to vote.
Yeah, yeah,
They could do that initially.
yes.
I
And
think
then-
the problem is that that parents may not understand that because
No.
it's an
Well,
extra step.
And
Right, and the man that testified said nowhere had it been discussed. It just, was a bottom line.
That's where people like us come in, We write to judges and we write to lawyers and we say, hey, do this.
Mm.
And this might also be a place for some educational activity on the league's part, both on the one end, educating parents about their rights, on the other side, educating them about how they can educate the people under their guardianship. And like I was working early voting for a political party outside of Halls earlier this year, and a mother came up with her daughter, who I'm going to guess was like 18, 19, 20, who clearly had some developmental issues of some sort. And she was coaching the daughter about what to say, about what to do. She had the daughter come up to each of the two political party tables and ask, what is the most important issue for you? And which was kind of a weird sort of thing, but we answered the question, but it seemed like she was parroting. She said exactly what her mother told her to say. And we gave her an answer, and then she went in and voted based on that. And I thought, she's going to vote based on what a couple of us just stammered out? That's kind of weird. Did she have a right to vote? Of course she did. There must be some better ways of reaching those people and helping them make informed decisions. I don't care who she voted for, but there have to be other ways. And there are
Right.
people here within the league who I'm sure know different ways that we can give them the tools that they need to make the best possible decisions.
Right, I agree, Celeste, and back to the original part of this discussion where, what if we don't come up with something to change a position? Based on what I've been hearing is there's a lot of work to do in the area of education. And the fact, just the simple statement that voting is a right. And I mean, we could spend several months just trying to figure out how to educate people on that. And based on the last election, people don't even understand the democracy and the freedom and the right to vote. I mean, half the country did not vote.
I
And this-
think that girl had better information than a lot of our voters from her quick question.
So
And-
there's work to do in the area of education.
And part of the P&E hearing, one of the delegate hearing that's proposing, no, it wasn't hearing. Bennett Parker was saying people talk, no, it might have been having to do with reproductive, it might have been having to do with reproductive choices. But anyway, someone said, we talk about it as a right, but it is not in the Constitution as a right.
It's
And
not.
so that is one of the consensus questions, and I don't remember which one, but you'll know it when you see it, but that's why that question is there. Should that right be enshrined in our Constitution so that we're explicitly stating that voting is a right?
It's question.
And I heard myself say, not recently, like in the Constitution, it says all men are created equal, all men in a Constitution. So there you go. I mean, yeah.
Well, and if you remember when Eileen Fillercorn was the first female Speaker of the House, the default was feminine articles that everybody was referred to in the feminine manner, and men were not comfortable with that, and yet we've had to deal with that forever.
So any other questions?
Oh, I wanted to say one more thing about, Celeste was talking about the young woman with some capacities to trying to understand the active voting or whatever, that is one of the things to discuss. You know, we see it in older voters, we see it in immigrant voters, you know, and you see it in the literacy tests that used to be administered. I mean, how do you make sure a voter is informed? Is that the most important thing in the active voting? But I mean, that could be part of your discussions too, because you can see it applied to a number of groups of voters.
I just had one question about a numbered question 2 in the consensus where it says, should the US Constitution be amended to create one national standard for who can vote? Did you have any notions of what would be in that standard, or is this just open for discussion?
It's open for discussion. I think probably we were thinking about the Voting Rights Advancement Act. Kind of sets a minimum standard, and some of the national ones like the HAVA or the National Voter Registration Act, you know, kind of set some national standards. Is there a floor that we want to set, which is what the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act would do.
And are those going to be in that November voter article that I obviously
Yes.
didn't read? Okay, good.
So, yeah, I'm looking at those questions again, and it mentions the Virginia Constitution. Are we going to have a copy of that, or is there?
No,
There's a link in the study, but I'm not, and I don't know if there was a link on the slides. I can't recall.
Okay. So it's just section 1, apparently.
Yeah.
yeah, that's written up in the
Qualifications.
study, even in the abbreviated version, that's written up.
Okay.
In fact, that question 5, one of the members wrote me and she said that wasn't quite clear, that it wasn't a complete sentence. It is a complete sentence. It's not very well written, but it refers to the section 1, article 2 of the Virginia Constitution that disenfranchised citizens convicted of a felony and those adjudicated to be mentally incompetent. That is in the Virginia Constitution.
And some of our local leagues have complained that those 2 groups are included in one sentence.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
And if you want to break it apart when you discuss it, we don't care, but
Okay, good.
the reason that they're together is because they're together in the Constitution.
Okay.
Pat, did you have a question or comment?
I
Yeah.
was just going to say that, of course, and it's a different issue that we're going to talk about. Somebody raised this issue the other day when we had a Zoom on the Electoral College. It's about people who live in U.S. territories because they cannot vote for president if they live in a U.S. territory and yet they're a citizen of the United States.
Yeah.
Some more disenfranchised people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not in Virginia, however, fortunately.
And
I
we
just-
were Virginia focused on this study.
Yeah.
We talked about whether or not to include immigrants because that was a hot button.
Yeah,
And
non-citizens.
it did come up at one of my presentations for a local league. It was before Congress had voted on whether or not there needed to be explicit statement about immigrants voting. But it does exist, and in Virginia, it's a class 5 felony if you are not a citizen. And so, but we didn't end up taking it on as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of information in this study about it, just
Yes.
if you look at other countries and how they
Yes.
handle residency.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a note. I have a friend who did a study for the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council is a think tank for NATO, and they were studying voting systems and voting interference in all the NATO nations, particularly interference by Russia. But this guy lives in Virginia, lives in Arlington, and he said, I am proud to say that Virginia has one of the safest voting systems in the world.
I would agree. And I'm trying to think which year it was, but there was an international group of observers that reached out to me when I was state president to I think that I had an interview and answered some questions, but afterwards they let me read the report before they shared it out. And I don't remember there was anything in particular regarding the way we did things, but some of the recent things that with, especially with list maintenance, had come up, and this was before the latest list maintenance thing. But it was interesting that they had reached out, that, you know, we do know there's international observers active.
Were they based in Arlington?
Perhaps it was a man and a woman I spoke to, and I'd have to go back and try to find a name.
They actually came to my polling place on election day. They're based in Arlington. That's an international poll observers. I have the name of it written down. They visited Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Montgomery County, DC, maybe another place too. Over the course of the day, they just got in a van and drove around, and they had a whole protocol. But yeah.
Into Langston Hughes too.
Was that statement Virginia has the safest voting system in the world? Is
Yes.
that what-
Yes. That's
Yeah.
what
In the
they said.
world?
In
In
the,
the world,
Wow.
that's,
in the world.
why are we messing with it?
Well, safe
It's
and
the
good aren't the same
system, it's
thing.
the system that's safe. It's not necessarily how you get to that and how you enter that system. Isn't so good in Virginia. The right to vote needs
Okay,
work in Virginia.
all right, okay. Once you vote, it's safe.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions?
And I would just share, as an election officer, I ended up, this was the first time I worked I worked early election, and I worked 44 to 45 days, which I hadn't expected to do. But lots of people come in and make comments about what's going on in other states. And I would tell them, well, here, you know, it's blah, blah, blah. Like one person was saying, well, I'm so glad that you asked for IDs. And I mean, we always have in Virginia. So I'm not really sure, you know, why you're saying this, but I do think that we're very well trained, particularly in Fairfax County. And I feel very strongly that our elections are well run and that our officers are well trained.
And you know, Deb, one of the things that I found when I have people say to me, oh, there's so much fraud in the elections, I'll say, well, you know, I've served as a poll officer, and let me tell you what I observe. And I said, now I'm only speaking for Fairfax County because that's where I did. And so I run through the training that we have to go through. The fact that we have to get there so early in the morning to set up everything, and we have to take an oath, you know, and then all day long, you've got a Democrat and a Republican sitting in front of you, watching everything you say and what you do. And then everything's got to match with what the registrars take in to identify you with the number that's in the machines. And people are just like, and this is from all over the United States, when I share this, and they say, really? And I said, yeah. And I said, you ought to check out your own state and see what goes on there, or your own county. And go work there. Go work there and see. So
Yeah, I think every American should work at the polls.
Yeah.
And should go to a naturalization ceremony.
exactly.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a good suggestion.
Yeah. So any other questions for Deb? This has been very interesting.
Thank you very much.
discussion this morning.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
really,
Thank you.
and thank you, Deb, for your time, and also for the past year and a half work so far, but you've still got another 6 months into this to get this through. So thank you for all that time and the time that your committee put in. We need, you know, we've kind of gotten away from people stepping forward to do these kind of educational studies. And I wish we'd get back to that, because I firmly believe that people vote based on some passion that they've got going on. And it has to do maybe not with voting issue itself, but like gun violence, like immigration issues. Well, the three biggest reasons for people voting this year were the economy, were reproductive rights, and immigration. Democracy was way down the list. So it's like, so I just encourage, get people more and more involved in stepping up and writing some of these studies. Yeah. So
yeah, I
thank
think I think they're a great opportunity to become educated, both as someone doing the study, but also as you discuss the study. And so
Yeah.
It's really important.
Right. And I thank you all for stepping up and agreeing to be discussion leaders. Yeah. So let me just summarize by saying that I will send you all a copy of the slide presentation and all this, so the script that goes with it. Okay, so it's going to come as a forward email from Deb, okay, that I had received. And then the other thing is that Pat's going to try to find that article she was talking about, and she'll send it to me, and I'll send it on to you all when I get it. Sue Warden, would you stay on a little bit so I could get your email? I have everybody else's email, but I don't have yours, and I want to make sure that I get the correct one. Okay.
Okay,
And remember, if you lost your November voter where Judy's summary is listed, it's on our website under the publications tab.
Right, right. And if any other of you want the full copy of the report, send me an email. Okay. And then I can respond to you directly, because I've already sent it to some people. And Ann, I remember you did request it from me, and I sent
Okay, I remember that.
it
It's
to
too
Sydney
long.
because she
Yeah.
requested it. But if the rest of you got it, Pat probably got it because of all your other involvement. Yes, yeah. You got it from Deb, actually. Yeah. Okay. So if anybody else wants the full study, send me an email and I will get that to you. Okay. So thank you, Deb. And thank you all of you for coming. Oh, Julie, are you saying something? You're muted, Julie. Okay. Okie doke. Thank you, Emma Beth, for setting us up with this meeting. Okay.
Thank you. I'll send you the link to the recording.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got me. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Susan, you're going to stay on, Susan.